Hello, this is Curt Pringle, and thanks for tuning into the Talking Issues series. And today we're going to talk about the future. And all of us have a car, and we all know technology in our cars has changed. I mean, I did, my first car had one of the roll-up windows, not electric windows or electric locks or even power brakes and power steering. But I won't say that because that kind of dates me. But today, technology in cars is moving forward, how cars communicate with everything along a street, and the street can communicate with everything along the car. But that's all I know about this stuff, other than from my friend Ryan Hall, who is with OmniAir, a company that really is focused on technology in vehicles, roadways, and similar systems. So, welcome, Ryan.
Hey, thanks, Kirk. Thanks for having me.
Did I cover that okay?
I did cover it well.
Oh,
that was a good overview for what we do.
Is that right?
Simplified it much better than I can do sometimes.
Yeah. So, how do cars today provide data, talk into the system, and communicate maybe with one another, and how will they in the future?
Well, that's exactly what we're working on right now. So we envision a future where we can eliminate 80% of the accidents that are caused by human error. And so that's having a device in the vehicle, and it's called an onboard unit. So it's inside the car, and then we have things called roadside units, or an RSU, which is on a signal head at every intersection, and it will provide basic safety messages to alert the driver of some sort of situation.
So right now, a lot of people say, "Oh my God, all of this knowledge people are going to get, or government's going to get, or whomever gets as to where I drive and what I'm doing." I know right here outside this window at the corner of Catella State College was one of the very first systems in Anaheim where they had cameras that focused on traffic lanes, and they were able to manage traffic. There's a traffic center in Anaheim where people can see the cars, and when we had big events like sporting events and otherwise, they could let so many cars go through, and they monitor it that way.
Sure.
For some reason, that isn't scary anymore, but to think that you would have more knowledge of what people are doing on the street becomes scary, right?
Sure, but a lot of the data is just really being exchanged between the roadside unit and the vehicle itself, or to other vehicles, so vehicle-to-vehicle communications. And so a lot of this information is not going to a hub. It would be way too expensive to pump all the data out and to save it and to track everything. So right now, what we're looking at, that data is a very small subset of like communication messages. Somebody slammed on their brakes, or you're approaching an intersection and a bicyclist coming up and you can't see around the building.
Okay, well, let's not get that far. But sure. Really, what you're saying is, and what your company does, is creates systems where all automakers, or all bicycle manufacturers, or all governments, or all infrastructure, they're using the same type of technology. Is that?
It's not just the same type of technology. So regardless of who makes it, so if it's Ford or GM or Ferrari or whomever, what we're doing is there's international standards that everyone is following. So what we do, we have our engineers and the people who are our members. They come together and we write test cases very specific to what that standard is, and how do we utilize that for a vehicle? How do we use that for an intersection? What type of applications will it have? And once we have all that together, we have a series of laboratories all over the world. We have test tool equipments that are qualified, and they will run through all these tests to make sure that they're interoperable, which means they can communicate with each other. Because the worst thing that could happen, just in Orange County, we have 34 cities, a county, and Caltrans, and each one has a different procurement department. So what our goal is to help them from making a procurement mistake, and that way they know that if they install it from vendor A, and 5 years from now they want to install stuff from vendor C, D, and E, they can. And it creates more, it lowers the price, there's more competition.
So the first step is what? Getting the cars, something in a car that can communicate with every other car.
Correct.
And you were saying that some of that communication could tell if my car is getting too close to the car in front of me?
Correct. Or if you slammed on your brakes, it could give a warning. If your car broke down on the side of a road or at the bottom of a hill and somebody's coming up and they can't see you, the radio waves reach the other vehicle, so they're sending them out. And we're doing it at like millisecond accuracy. So the latency is extremely high. Like there's no latency between those messages.
So when is as soon as something like that, for example, maybe that first step comes into practice?
Okay, so we've already certified a few devices in Asia. So for the Korean market, we're still moving along in the United States. We had a little bit of setbacks with the FCC, the rules and regulations about spectrum usage.
Because all this something helps connect the cars, right? So
Yes.
it's not on a Wi-Fi network or a cellular.
It's not on the actual network. It's the cellular radio, and they're communicating between each other. So it's actually not hitting the network. Hitting the network will be great for other applications in the future. Like if you want to know how long the countdown timer for the next signal is, so you can kind of do some of those things. There's nothing that's critical to life.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that if the network goes down, that you can still communicate these safety messages.
Yes.
So
What was that example of the cars in San Francisco that were connected?
a couple of weeks ago, like the cars in San Francisco, they're fully autonomous. California said, "Hey, like go for it. No driver in the car." Apparently, there was a large concert, and these autonomous vehicles were actually connected to the network, so it's not 100% autonomous. The network dropped, the car stopped. People got locked in their cars. It created traffic jams.
Oh.
And you're like, okay, well, that's
because they were on a wireless network?
They were on an actual carrier's network.
Okay.
Yep.
So what you're looking at is a different network or place within the spectrum.
Plays within the spectrum, and it communicates vehicle to vehicle or vehicle to the infrastructure. And we call that vehicle to everything communication. So you'll see things like V to X or CV to X, which stands for cellular vehicle to everything communications.
Wow. So not only are you talking about cars as vehicles, but bicycles too.
Bicycles too, scooters, motorcycles.
So if you had one in a scooter and the scooter comes whizzing up the street, it would tell the car, don't make a right-hand turn because here comes a scooter.
Or you can see the scooter, and it also you could notify the bicyclist or the person on the scooter that there's a car approaching from behind. So it would give you a warning. So if you're not looking behind you, it gives you an opportunity to see that something's approaching you or in your lane, or
if you're preparing to go across an intersection.
Correct.
That bicycle could be warned there's a car coming down and not going to stop in time.
No, and we've already demonstrated that. We have one of our clients called Spoke Safety out of Colorado, and we've demonstrated this. They're partnering with Audi, and we were in M City in Michigan, and then we also did the pilot in Florida just a few months ago. And it's an amazing technology. As you're coming through to an intersection, and it's a blind intersection. I'm in the car, and this is the first time that I saw it really in action too. So I was excited because in the beginning it was like Matrix, zeros and ones. But we're in the car, we're coming, we see the intersection, it looks clear, and the bicyclist is coming. We get a message that the bicyclist is entering the intersection before we can actually see it, and then we can slow down and stop. And the guy popped right in front of us, and we stopped. But without that, then it's blind. So there's some really great technologies that are already in place, but it's getting them to scale. And one of the things that we have to worry about, it's like chicken and the egg. So we want them, the automakers want to put them but they also want, the signalized intersections, and then it's trying to figure out how do you trust the messages. And so there's a whole cybersecurity component. What messages do you trust? Which ones do you use?
Right.
Which ones do you
so that's not. So you're racing ahead on this car.
Yeah.
First off, does the system, in fact, in a car, does it brake the car? I mean, could you create a system where it's braking, or just like my car? If I run up too fast behind somebody and that car stops, I get that little red box that says, and then it'll apply the brakes. And
sure. So
it
could be incorporated into your ADS system, right?
And that would be an automaker's decision.
And that's and everything's really going to be the automaker's decision. It's like which message will they want to display, how many. In some of like in Southern California, we have hundreds of thousands of vehicles traveling through on the interstate. Well, which messages do you have? Which ones do you ignore? And some really great ones would be for, say, truckers, that if you have a high-speed curve warning. So if your truck is going to get off of the interstate and it's going 60 miles an hour and you know you're good enough, I mean, it can warn the driver to slow down because you're way past that particular speed limit. I mean, that's what knocked out the bridge not too long ago in Pennsylvania because he took it too fast.
Interesting.
So there's lots of different applications, or even, you know, if you have inclement weather, if a car in front of you, the traction control goes off, it could send a message to the cars behind it that there's slippery conditions ahead to be warned.
I see. So the moving vehicle has this monitoring inside it, be it a car, a scooter, a bike, that type of thing, and you create a network that is able to be on light poles and something to be able to connect those vehicles. Do they connect that way, or do they connect just vehicle to vehicle without that system?
Well, yeah, they're independent of each other. So the intersection is sending out different kinds of messages to the vehicles, but it can also collect data from approaching vehicles, the speed, and then it gets, so if there's a collision warning that could come on to say that if a car is speeding, the signal recognizes that this car at its current rate of speed won't be able to slow down. It's going to run through the intersection. It can send a collision warning to all the other cars that are approaching that intersection, so then they have time to slow down so they can avoid that.
So you talk about data, though. So everybody's fearful of data and things collecting their data. What collects our data now?
Well, I mean, it depends. It depends on the car you drive. If you have a Tesla, they collect tons of data. They build their maps. It's recording all the time. It makes it
Does it
easier for them.
record where I stopped? When they know how many times I stopped at McDonald's?
Probably. I mean, that's data that's going to be important. I mean, you know, one of the things you have to look at too, like the safety aspect is one thing, but then how do you monetize that? So it's expensive to put these things in their car. So if you're going to add this, well, what else could you have? And so you could envision a future where you went to Starbucks every day and McDonald's wanted to advertise to you and said, well, I know it's like, hey, you can get a free coffee at McDonald's. Here's the map. Do you want to get it?
Yeah.
And then you could go and get your free coffee.
Right.
So there's, you know, different versions, but we're still on this very infantile stage of really just wanting these really basic messages.
So Tesla's get a lot of that data.
So Tesla has tons of data. You plug in, it uploads your data, it sends it
When
in.
I'm charging, it's
charging, you charge it up.
Nice.
It's sending data all the time. It has cellular connections to it, so it's doing it that way as well. And Tesla's more, their data's really, that's really what drives their company. It's more of a data collection company than a car company. They make great cars, but they collect better data.
But if I had my cell phone in the car, I don't have a Tesla. If I had my cell phone, is it collecting as much or more data?
I think it's collecting much more data because there's 360-degree camera.
Right.
So what it does, it helps build its map. So when it's driving,
you're saying
especially
the
the Tesla. So if it's in self-driving mode, and there's lots of cars in Southern California, every day it's collecting data. It makes better models every day.
I guess I'm going to compare Tesla collection of data versus me just having a iPhone.
Your iPhone collects tons of data on you. I mean, you opt in. So every time you put, like I put in today, it's like, oh, I know how to get here. But I'm like, do I know the fastest way to get here? No. Sometimes it's the freeway. Sometimes it's just up Catella. So I don't, so you put it in.
It knows where you're going.
So it knows where I'm going. It knows how long, because it knows where I parked, right?
Yeah.
It knows how long I sat here, did this interview, and what time I left, and where I'm going next. And it actually anticipates where I'm going next. It will probably tell me, do you want to go home?
Yeah.
So
a few years ago, but back in the time when I was mayor, I know that this one marketing company wanted to put in a text-based, SMS-based system, so all visitors would sign up for notices, and as you're walking by Morton's, it would send you a notice because it knows you're out in front of Morton's, and it'll say, "Here, come in for the happy hour menu" or something. I mean, that type of stuff is happening. Even on vehicles, right? I mean,
sure. I mean, it's like the movie Minority Report. I mean, that's a great example of like people walking down the street and they're having all these catered ads. It's like everyone has that experience of looking something up or talking about something, and then your feed is full of these things. I was looking up electric bikes one day. Well, I can't get electric bike ads off my phone. Like I can't get rid of it. It's all I see. There are hundreds of them, and so sometimes like, oh, that's not. It's convenient. So if I were in the market, I was like, okay, well, look, there's lots of options that
Yeah.
I didn't know about, but now they have this data that I'm looking for it.
So once the car companies start putting something in the cars, once the cities and others say, okay, we want to coordinate our intersections and have more smart intersections, other vehicles on the road other than cars do that. What is the wildest application of those types of things? I mean, you were talking earlier about you can synchronize streetlights.
You can do. Well, when you get to that particular part, yes, synchronizing street signs. How do you move from one corridor to the next? Like right now, it's disjointed. So each city. So I live in Anaheim. If I go to Fullerton or Orange, those signals aren't, unless they have some special timing plan, like an emergency plan or something like that.
OCTA does have some global synchronization programs like Euclid or Oso Parkway, just so you know.
Right.
And but you're right, not every street's that way.
But not every street that way, and that's very coordinated. It's because they're probably not all in the same system, so they have to be very coordinated and talk to each other to do these things. Versus having all the data coming in and it's self-monitoring.
Yeah, I will tell you, the public, I think, out of all the things you could do to make traffic flow better, the public understands and yearns for more streets being synchronized. So you could synchronize in the morning, move traffic towards the freeways, or in the afternoon, move traffic away from the freeways back to homes.
Sure.
And without having to put in sensors at every street light, right?
Yep.
I mean, or street.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
No.
this would be something that would be communicated through a network that
through
would
the
be
network.
established.
And there's different aspects of that too. Let's say at the port in Long Beach. Well, you can incentivize the truck traffic by giving them applications so they can get priority freight. So if you're operating heavy freight, and you say, hey, between the hours of 7 p.m. and 4 a.m., you're going to have priority signalization, which means you won't have to slow down, to necessarily stop nearly as much. Because there's nothing worse than a tractor having to start over and gear back up, because that's where most of the pollution is coming from. And so if you can make it easier for them or incentivize this, it gives them a reason to do it. So there can be environmental benefits as well. So it depends on what you look at.
Yeah. So what are some of the wildest applications of what you're seeing that could possibly be put into place?
I think replacing the gas tax. I think it's called road user charging. You'll see an acronym called RUC. So you'll start seeing that. Some of our members, like we have Caltrans as a member, Oregon DOT, Drive Ohio, City of Austin. And so we have working groups that this is one of the projects that they're working on, because they want to see, well, how can we monetize this? If we're a city and we're going to invest in these RSUs, putting these roadside units up, how do we monetize this? How can we make it so it's more affordable to install them, or would encourage them to install it?
Yeah.
And so you could look at that as one of those mechanisms.
Yeah, and when people think that virtually all of the funding to maintain streets and highways and freeways in California comes from the gas tax, and we all think that's miserable, we don't want to pay a gas tax, but in fact, that's the money that has historically been set aside just for those purposes.
Right.
And Governor Newsom has proposed by 2035, all vehicles in California that are newly sold will be electric vehicles. None of them are paying a gas tax.
Right, and they're not now.
Right,
So that's a problematic. I mean, there are
Right.
some very heavy electric SUVs they're on the roadways that heavy vehicles create more wear and tear on the roadway, and they're not paying a penny to utilize that service.
But they're soon looking for you talk about the semis and 18-wheelers and others leaving the port.
Yep.
There's a big push to have those electrified. And
Sure.
if they're electrified, they're not paying any gas or diesel tax for maintaining the roads either. So you kind of say, okay, that person with a Toyota Corolla, 1995 Toyota Corolla is paying more to maintain the roads than an electric.
We won't have roads to maintain. There won't be any. We'll have horrible roads. Is what we're going to end up with.
No, you're supposed to talk about the positives.
Well,
of
it
the
is a
future,
positive.
not
But these are some of the things that we can help alleviate. We can help figure out how to better collect these things, or how to, instead of having more toll roads, how do you monetize a particular road that's really bad? How do you, what's involved with that? How do you say, hey, this road from A to B, there's lots of potholes. Everyone who drives this road is going to get charged 10 cents for the next 5 years, and everyone who drives on it, brings them that amount, and eventually that roadway gets repaved and funded, and we can move it to somewhere else that there's a high.
So be careful. People who are watching are saying, "Oh, geez, this is just another way for them to get more money out of me," but they're going to be paying less of a gas tax because they aren't going to pay the gas tax side.
Mm-hmm.
What other of those positive benefits, if every vehicle was connected? So you're talking about accidents avoidance as it relates to intersections, but what accident avoidance?
Well, for lots of things. I mean, 80% of the accidents can be reduced. I mean, there's some are just, natural disasters. You can't help it. There's nothing you can do about it, a rock slide or things like that. But it can warn you about a drunk driver getting on the interstate the wrong direction. So if somebody, and that happens a lot, they get on the on-ramp looks big. They're designed to be driven in both directions. It's part of the whole the design of them. And so when somebody gets on the wrong way, you can't. Sometimes you see something like, "Oh, is that coming toward me or not?" Well, you'll definitely know because it will warn you that there is somebody driving towards you, not away from you. So it gives you plenty of warning.
So you avoided my question before. How soon will these types of things happen? I mean, are there any U.S. automakers today that are putting this type of application system in their vehicles?
Not yet. I mean, we still have waivers from the FCC. It takes a couple of years for them to be able to get something like that into production. Mm-hmm. We're still waiting for a lot of the device makers themselves, the people who make the onboard units, to continue to test them and to go through this process, so they know that they're interoperable. So it's really important. Mm-hmm. I think once we have more people requesting it, when they know a little bit more about what OmniAir is doing, and they're requesting that they deploy like a certified device, and we're very clear about what that means. Like, it meets these minimum standards. They can communicate with each other. As long as everyone goes through the same program, they will be able to communicate well with each other. Otherwise, it's all about the marketing. Like, does the hype live up to reality? And I think a lot of the times it doesn't.
Right. So I really use Waze a lot, Google Maps, and those kind of things. So is this just changing that out? I mean, is that what I'm really going to get? I mean, right now my car does have a navigation system, but
no,
is it going to be the same type of thing, just done through the car?
No, well, because it's different. So what you're talking about is like a simple navigation. So it's like from point A to point B. So it gets much more technical in the car. So the car will have to have, like, its GPS is so precise that it will know, like, to the lane where you're at, to like that millimeter. So the accuracy is really important because it needs to know if there's 3 lanes, are you in the correct lane? How does it know if you're on the wrong side of the road? How does it know when you're on an off-ramp or an on-ramp on a flyover on the freeway that below you, you're not driving into the car? So it measures all these different components. And so it's much different than a simple navigation that gets data from the state. So like Waze and Google Maps, they get a lot of data from roadway sensors currently. So we talked about Anaheim. So all of Anaheim's intersections are linked up and they're pulling data. They're pulling data from the state. And
this means
Caltrans, all the states.
Caltrans buys that data?
Caltrans sells. Caltrans gives that data away to all these people.
Oh, is that right?
So it's the state's already collecting a ton of data, traffic data. It's more anonymous. I believe that you can make a lot of this technology anonymous about in your vehicle. It might be a little bit more complicated to be anonymous completely if you turn it into
paying taxes
on it.
Right.
So
exactly. They want to know where to mail the bill. But tell me, is this just the precursor to autonomous vehicles?
I believe this will help autonomous vehicles gain the traction that it needs. Because
right now, yeah, like the pun.
It's a little bit traction because right now autonomous vehicles, there's some really great stuff, right? But they're limited. Living in California is great. We don't have a lot of fog and bad weather. So the radar and lidar that does a decent job, but there's a lot of factors that come into play. If you can augment what's going into that vehicle and the vehicle's AI can determine what it is, it will help that vehicle even be better. So it will learn about what's in the roadway. How are the different sets going on? Is there a construction zone? When did it start? When does it end? Is it detecting the vulnerable road user? So they can shrink these things down. They can have them in construction workers, helmets.
So what percentage of vehicles will drive as autonomous vehicles in 5 years?
None. I don't see it. I think the part that we're doing is very complicated, and it's a simple. Should be
simpler aspect.
It's a simpler aspect.
Running the whole
vehicle
and not hitting a pedestrian or
Correct.
watching out for a high curb as opposed to a low curb.
Right, and I think this will really elevate that experience. I think if more people were ready to adopt it, and they say, "Hey, wow, this is a really great thing. We should be putting this in our vehicles. We want this in our vehicles." The customers have to want it, right? And you have to make that argument. There's a safety because we're not asking for a government mandate. It's like if the market's bearing it. We're doing this all on our own. We do these testing events all over the world. They're not funded by government. They're all self-funded by our members to do all the testing. So there's a really big ecosystem. You know what I mean? It's everybody. Like we have chipset manufacturers, we have OEMs, we have the tier 1s, 2s, 3s. We have big implemented, so like interstate owners. So there's so much work that's been going into this, and we just hope that we're at that precipice where for this thing to take off. Because we're right there. We know the technology works. We've seen it work. Now it's just a matter of getting it to scale and having people ask for it.
Wow. Awesome. A lot of information. I got to think about that for a while. But thank you for coming in, Ryan, and sharing with us. And thanks for being here.
You're very welcome, Curt.